on that. I was working on that assessment too, using from the database. So I had finished that. So we need to go to the school API. School API. Okay. And where is the, oh shit. Where is it? Here it is. Okay, what was it? Day one. Minimize, not maximize, minimize, please. How do I? There we go. Okay, close that. And this was for, yeah. Docker compose up, Docker compose. Okay, so to run the application, all you need is, okay, I guess that's what, okay. So let me, how do we move this over? Okay. So I got my Docker compose up, which I need to run in another terminal, which is over here. Uh, and what's the other command? Let me see. Where is mine? Let's go to the school API one. School API one. What's that doing? Okay, destroying, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Okay, that's not. Okay, okay. I don't. Uh, yeah. School API. Okay, so it's running. But what command did I use to run it? Docker. Yeah. I'm trying to find the command I used to run it, or if it was just Docker compose up.
I believe it was just
Docker compose up dash D. That was it. I guess that's it. All right, man. Container school API started. Okay. And then it's we were communicating with the school DB. Is this it? Oh, no. There was something else. Okay. Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So and this is a student. So let's see here. Let's do uh oh, I forgot the table name now. Oh shit. What was the table name? School app students. Uh, oh wait, isn't that the man? I do not remember. School API. Okay, API project. Student app. Okay, what did I name this darn table though? Is it in manage.py? Or
it's
is it
not.
in
Sorry,
uh,
it's not student app students, that last entry in that.
models? That's it.
Oh, okay.
Students, that's the name of it. Okay, select star. Okay, students, that's the name of the table.
If I remember from Docker Compose too, it's always going to do that. It's going to name the project, or maybe it's the app name underscore, and then what the table name is.
Select star. Um, that's it.
Yeah, but Docker Compose always makes the tables as the app name underscore the table name. So your models, if you do, I bet you if you do select star from students underscore app underscore students, or student underscore app underscore students, it'll give you what you're looking for.
Okay, I think you're Yeah, I'm trying to, what do I do with the file? Structure, here you go. What command? Postgres school DB DT da 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 da. Ran 6 tests. Ah, it was a unit test that I ran that passed. Okay, that's what it was, because I wasn't really working with the tables. Okay, that's what it was. Okay. Do you do you want me to run the unit test or you?
Well, yeah, but before you do, like what Chan was saying, like just try selecting all from that table.
Okay, select star from student app. Thank you, Sean. I was listening to you. Okay. Yeah. So that's the database. I didn't put anything into it. I just made it, and
Okay.
then I put in the unit test. And uh, I wasn't there unit test manage.py. I know there was unit test for. Let me see. School research. Was it unit test for this one?
I think it was just test.ty, right?
Ran 6 tests, found manage py.test. That's it.
Hmm.
But the command to is it Docker compose manage? What is the command? There is a command for that. Ran install Django environment.
Do you have to put Python in front of it?
Huh? What did you say?
Do you have to put Python in front of
Yeah, he's
manage
right.
test?
Is Python in front of it?
Yeah, Python manage.py.
Why? What happened?
Oh, your virtual environment.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Source school API. Yep. Then slash activate. Okay. Yeah. So,
Nice. So all six have run. All right, let's take a look at your models now, your students' model to see what kind of fields and requirements you made for those fields in order to make the tests pass.
student models.
Should
The
be out of student app.
student app. And so these here, I learned about the different fields by going to the site. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I know I got the website in here somewhere. Yeah, here. Django has a documentation for the field types that you can use. And so that's where I went for like on the Boolean field and determining the integer and stuff like that and how the blank equals false, meaning that it has to have a value, but if it's true, then it's optional. So it's yeah, it's um so yeah.
Cool. Yeah, all that looks good. Yeah, I like how in 10 you're specifically using positive big integer, and in the next line you're using the char field because we have underscores in those combinations.
Yes.
Cool. All that looks solid.
Thank you. And also with the email field, what I found out, because for the since the student email was mandatory, the Django also has a validator for the email, but I didn't want to fool with it because of the last, what is it, the et whatever, yada yada yada. But there's a way that you can, they have a function so you can validate before it gets um put into the field. Um, was it this one? Was it this one? I think it was this one. I think it was this one. Where are you? Uh, this one. Why can't I? Email. Where are you? Email. Okay, well, email. Email field, and they got something here. Email validator. And so yeah, but that was cool to see because I was wondering. I was like, well, since this student one is mandatory, there's a certain way that it has to look. But I didn't fool with it, but it was just good to see that they had that there. So yeah.
Yeah, nice. You're kind of peeking ahead here because validators are going to be covered tomorrow.
Okay. Okay.
Good stuff, though.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, let's get on with the rest of the Pokemon examples. I'm going to share my screen, and then we can switch back to school API. Okay. So we are on day 2. Let me get all of this out of the way. So we are going to continue learning about the field inside of models. And something that Mike showed us is already also kind of peeking ahead because that's what we're covering today. So we've already seen a bit of this, but where he was using blank equals true, just like he said, that allows you to have us basically an empty string in that place. And there are cases where you're going to want to do that. There are cases where you're not going to want to do that. And there are cases where you don't want to do that if you're doing something else like setting null to true, because there could be conflicts between the two of them. One example I could think of for when you don't want to do both, but you only want to do one, is if you were to, this isn't in the README, so let me see, pull this up. If you were to have an example where you have documents. So let's go back to where it says here, there's a file field, there's an image field. First off, you generally don't want to use null equals true in this case, just because of how Django handles these fields. So maybe I should backtrack a bit. You've already learned on Monday that different fields have different, I guess, like built-in properties, right? So definitely utilize that documentation, utilize things like this, the tables that will give you some easily accessible information on what you can and cannot do. Or you could just kind of brute force it in Django and just delete your migrations if it doesn't work out. But going back to the same example of whether or not you want to use blank equals true or null equals true, if you were to, in this case, for example, right, set both, you might have, you'll then have to account for that later on, where when you are making exceptions for the logic inside of your application, you're going to have to do something like this, where you're checking to see if it's either none or if it's blank, where it would be much easier to just have one of these rules, file equals blank, as opposed to having to check for both. So it's going to simplify the logic, right? In our example today for Pokemon, we're going to add some new fields. We're going to use date field for one. We're going to use Boolean field for the other. And we're going to see how, well, first, this is going to throw an error if we try to do this right away. So let's go ahead and try to run that. Let's see. I have I've got my environment up. I'm gonna go into my Pokemon model. So let me go to Pokemon app, models, got my virtual environment set up. I've got Docker running, should be able to access the database. And from here, if we start to add some of these new models or these new fields. So one, we want to add a date field. Two, we want to add a Boolean field. I'm going to save. I'm going to run my, just making sure this is the right directory. I'm going to run my Python manage.py, make migrations. Thing. It's the wrong virtual environment. All right, let's try again. Okay. Might be just some wonky VS Code stuff. Oh, actually, I think I know what it is. There was no requirements.txt. I had just forked this on. Oh, there is actually. So install -r requirements.txt. Okay, now this should install everything that we need. And now let's try running our make migrations. Okay, so far so good. We have a confirmation saying that some changes were found for our Pokemon model. Now, if we run migrate, okay. I was hoping to get an error. All right, let's see if this actually populated. So I'm going to hop into my container. And I'm just going to grab the command. I'm going to change a few things. I actually have a few different containers running. One, I think I want to change this name to I am going to switch back to my other environments. And we're just going to go from here. So if we at our table, we have Pokedex underscore DB. And actually, let me see if that's there too. And this. All right. Can anyone tell me what I'm forgetting? Because it's not applying any of these migrations. And it is not updating the database. I'm going to double check my directory here. I do have a migrations folder.
Were you going from the ground up? Or were you starting somewhere in the middle? Because you said you had already did something.
Yeah.
Um,
Earlier today, I started ground up, and this version is actually from the repository. So this should be where Omer left off on Monday. And so far, I've set up my environment. Let me double check.
Did you ever do Docker compose up? Did you ever run it?
Yeah,
And
that should be
because
the
you do that, and then you do the models, and then you do make my migration, and then migrate.
Mhm. Okay, let me see something real quick. So I do have my Docker Compose up. And one thing that I'm doing is I'm running multiple containers. So I'm going to change this to 5456. And I am going to exit out of this. Try again. Or actually, before I do that, migrations again. Okay, now we're getting something different. Okay, yes. So I forgot to change my setting inside of my database setting inside of my settings.py. So whenever you first start up a project, I think you should remember that you want to add the app that you create. And then you also want to specify what database you're going to be using if you're not going to be using the default MySQL. And in my case, the reason why I had to change my port number is because I actually have two other Django apps. And so I had the first one using the default 5454 and the second one using 5455 and this one using 5456. So now that it's changed, I've been able to run my migrations. And if we go into our Pokedex, let's see, we now actually have all of the tables. So let's look at Pokemon app underscore Pokemon. I need my from. And okay, there is nothing yet. All right. So we at least see that we have all the columns that we've created, right? We've got ID, we've got name, we've got level, data encountered, and captured. If we were to add an entry to this now, because we set auto now add to true, it should automatically add a date time value. So let's see if that works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hop back into the shell. So Python py shell. And we are going to go ahead and create a Pokemon. So first we have to import our model. So from Pokemon underscore app models, import our class, which is Pokemon. And now we can use that class. So I'm going to create Pikachu. He's going to be set to Pokemon. And we're going to pass in some values, right? Let's give him a name. Let's set a level. And let's first see what happens if I leave it at this, if I don't add anything for date encountered or captured. Pikachu dot save. All right. So we're seeing that there's a failure because we did not specify that we want a null value for Boolean field. And we do see that a date was added because we used auto now add equals true. So what we could do in this case is we could then try adding something like null equals true. Save, and let's rerun our migration. And I'm going to leave all of that open actually. So I have all of that readily accessible. And is this is not the right one. Where it is. Gotta reactivate my environment. What was I doing? I was oh yes, we were going to run migrate. So Python py, we made migrations, made changes to one of my models. Alter field captured on Pokemon. So it's registering that we made a change here, and that's adding the null equals true. Now let's try running migrate. Okay, looks good. Let's look at what this now looks like. So let's go back to our database. Let's select all from here, and there is no Pikachu, which we should expect because we never actually got to save Pikachu. It threw an error at us. I think I do have to exit out of this for the changes to refresh. So I'm going to exit out and I'm going to hop back in, and let's do that import again. Let's set another variable for Pikachu. Let's add all of this stuff, and let's see if it allows a null value this time around. Okay, so now Pikachu.save. Okay, no errors. All right. What do I do next? First, let's see. Yep. If I check my Pokedex underscore DB table, we can see that Pikachu has been added. We have that date inside of the date encountered column, and we have a null value for captured. I was hoping it would replicate, or that I could replicate an issue I had earlier, but I must have done things in a different order. I don't know if anyone has experienced this yet. Did anyone experience trouble running migrate when you were working on your school API? Because if you do run into that, you'll see inside of your app a migrations directory. And every time you run a successful make migrations with changes, this is where that goes. And so if you're running into issues and you just want to like go back a step or two, you could just delete your latest migration. So that's something to remember when you're troubleshooting. It's an option, one of your options. Okay. So those are two new fields that we're using today. There's a table here to talk about all of these other fields. For the most part, you should be able to use either null or blank. I really think that, yeah, this is the only one that says not to do it. Now, why would you want to use one over the other? Daryl, what do you think?
To use blank or to not use blank?
Right, or null.
Well, I guess if we want to use like none, that'll allow us to use none.
Yes, exactly. That's a good example. Sometimes when you generate a field, you'll want to have none as opposed to an empty string. Let's see, do any of our examples actually? Okay, I don't think any of our examples will show that. But let's keep going. So we've talked about adding a few new fields. Now we could continue to improve our model by adding some additional logic, like adding class methods, for example. And before we do that, let's just see what this is. It's just adding another Pokemon. Okay, the first method that we could add, you've seen this before, it's your double underscore method string. This basically says that the name we specify, self.name, and a string. So it's utilizing string interpolation to return a statement about the object. And here we have a method where we can modify the values inside of one of our columns, in this case, the level. And we have a method here for changing status, very simple stuff. So let's see what that all looks like. We go back to our model. Just add our methods here. I'm going to save. We don't have to run migrations on these, but I think we do still have to exit out of this shell and enter back in. And now that we've done that, if I call Pikachu, for example, oh, let me do my imports. Now it's going to return that sentence that we added, right? So we're calling self through the name Pikachu, because that's what we had assigned the values for the database to. And it returns the name of that object and a string, whether or not it has been captured. So now let's try running this level up method. So Pikachu dot, or actually, no, I want to run change caught status. So if I run this and I pass in let's see, status is we're captured a false value. And now I go back to Pikachu, or after I save, I go back to Pikachu. Oh, I should probably set it to true. I set it to true, check on Pikachu, and it shows that it has been captured. So you can use methods, you could write methods, and you can use those methods to update the values inside of that model directly inside of the shell in Django. Now, let's see. If we go back to our database and we do another select statement, we can see that we've added another Pikachu and the value for captured is set to true. Okay. Okay, and this last thing, I think Omer already showed you this, but one of the benefits of Django is being able to use something like the Django admin site. And once you have it set up, you basically can register your models. In this case, we're going to register our Pokemon. So let's go to our admin.py. Okay, looks like it's already here. And if just want to make sure that there's a user actually created. So I'm going to go back to my root directory. I'm going to run create super user. And I'm just going to put in some values. So username of Django, no email address, Django 3. And I am going to, it's complaining, but I am going to say yes anyway. And it's created successfully. So now if I run my server, we can see our primary success screen, and then we can access our admin console by adding a /admin to the URL. And so if I do Django and I do the password that I gave it, I now have access to the admin panel. And the cool thing about this is just like you're able to modify the values inside of your table straight from the built-in Django shell, you're also able to update them through a UI. So let's go to our Pokemon table. Let's go ahead and add a new Pokemon. And it's even got like this built-in interface, right? So you could visually see like what fields take what kind of data types. We have a name here, so we could add a name, we could set a level, and we could set a status for captured. And notice there's nothing for date captured because we set that to just use auto now add, which will then add a date whenever you create a new row. So let's save that. Let's look at our Pokemon. Oops, I don't want to edit him. I want to see the table. Okay, let's look at it in here. And we see that we now have a muck level 99. It's been captured, and the encounter date is today. Okay. Where is everyone at? I know on Monday, you all had like a really long session, like 2 hours long going into this. So I'm guessing if no one's been saying anything, you all are caught up. You're all are good with Django right now, and you're ready to go with school API too.
Um, I would say, I mean, having the guide, the walkthrough guide is great, but I wouldn't say that I'm um on on the top of it. You know, there's still stuff to learn as far as with the process. And I guess in other words, I wouldn't be able to just make it without having a guide, I guess you could say.
That totally makes sense. So to start, you at least have the repository. You have all of these here for reference. You have the documentation. You could create your own notes. Maybe if we go through and just talk about some of Django's design, that might make things make a little more sense. Sure you all remember, one of the first things you do when you create a new project is you set the project. So the project itself, in this case, is the Pokedex project. And then there is the Pokemon app that we created. What is the difference between the two? Which is you're muted.
Between what?
Between the project and
I couldn't hear you.
between the project and the app, what's the difference?
Um, I guess files are different, but
Sorry, what was that?
The project contains all of like your port information, your we haven't gotten to the URLs part, but like what URLs it's going to go to when you do what like manage.py. And then your Pokemon app is going to contain like all your table and database information.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
So you can have only one project, but you could have many apps within that project. And that's why within your settings under the project, you're able to modify certain things like the installed applications. Whenever you add a new app, you have to add it here. Anything else that you need to configure is more optional, like as you saw earlier, changing our database to PostgreSQL. The reason you're going back to that root directory and running Python manage.py on anything is basically because that's how Django is designed. Manage.py is a Python script in the root directory of the Django project itself, right? Not the project that you created, but the root directory where you installed your virtual environment and all of that stuff. So if you were to run, I think if you just run out of here, which is this one. If you were to just run Python manage.py by itself without anything, it's going to tell you all of the different commands that is available to you. So if you ever just need a reminder for how to do something, just run manage.py by itself. And then you could use manage.py help on whatever subcommand. Like let's say, for example, to learn more about that specific function. And because it's a Python script, .py, we want to have Python in front of it. Okay. So this tells us that test is, it doesn't have any required arguments. It does allow for all of these. So things like failing fast and setting specific patterns. And with any other command, you can do the same thing. So start app, for example, tells us that it requires a name and a directory. And all these other options are available as well. Okay. What else? Yeah, I just want to get a feel for like where you all are at with Django. I know it's a lot, like Omer's class was like 2 hours. There's a lot to throw at you, but you're going to be going over this throughout a number of weeks. So you'll have time for all of this to sink in, and repetition is going to help, right? So if there's anything that's like super confusing, we could try to clear that up now.
Yeah, one thing I got is where you open up a Python shell
Mhm.
and you created variables to put in the tables, right? And so instead of doing SQL insertions, you're basically creating that in Python. Does that save? Because I thought you had to rerun and recreate them again within the Python shell.
Let's see. Okay, so
I think
right.
it's supposed to, right? Because that's the values thing.
Sorry, what?
I think it's supposed to save because that's what that values portion. It's like all coming back to me from like 2, 3 days ago, whatever it was. Like trying to jog my memory. But yeah, does it save? Like you created the Pikachu variable, you
Mhm.
input the, Pikachu equals Pokemon, and then it's you passed in its arguments,
Mhm.
And then did that save to the database?
Yes, it did.
Okay, even if you close out of that Python shell, it's still in there.
Yes.
Okay.
So we see those changes are already there. Same with the changes that we made inside of the admin console. What didn't change, or sorry, what didn't save is the variable Pikachu itself, right? Because
Okay.
so yeah, when I did Pikachu equals whatever or Charizard equals,
Okay, it creates a new one.
yes, exactly.
Okay, that's where I was getting confused. I was like, oh, I didn't save because it created a new one. All right, so and this is probably something we're going to learn maybe on Saturday is in SQL where we made the init file and we created all our insertions for the tables. Is
Mhm.
there something like that in here, or am I getting ahead of us with like, okay, we have all the data, we want to insert it into our database. Uh, we shouldn't have to go into a Python shell and do each one, hand type it in, and send it that way, I imagine.
You could actually still do it through a SQL script, and you should be able to do it through a Python script as well. Is it covered on Saturday?
I
Let's
don't know. I haven't looked ahead. I'm just kind of guessing.
okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you definitely can still do it with SQL. And as to whether or not you should do it with a Python script, like flat out vanilla Python, yes, you can figure out a way to do that. You can interact with SQL databases with Python. Built into Django, I don't know if like there's anything special that allows you to do the same thing. So let's see.
Sean,
Yeah.
are you talking about the process where it injects when it's building it?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, okay. Yeah, because I know, we could always read in the stuff like he was saying using from a Python script. But yeah, that is a good one you asked.
Right. So if we had like, there's got to be some automated way for, I don't know, when we make migrations or something like that. Like, I don't see that yet.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see. I'll try to whip something up like really fast and show that during stand down. How about that?
Okay.
Cool.
So like what the best way to do it for this process that we're trying to learn is. So I mean, it's fun learning new ways, but like, what's going to be the best way going forward, I guess.
Yeah, I think this first part, at least how I'm interpreting it, is we haven't really shown you anything that we're like describing as being the best way. Instead, we're showing you different options, right? You could still interact with your database through Docker, through,
Yeah.
well, you could also use the shell and you could also use the admin console.
Okay. So I guess the question would be that you could show us at the end is with the school API we're making,
Mhm,
if we had a whole bunch of students already in a file,
mhm.
how do we get that to load up at what point in this process would we load that file up? When we add all these to the table, like how would that look?
Mhm. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
You can have that answered during stand up.
All right.
Cool. All right. Nor, Phyllis, and I will be around for questions. I'm going to open up breakout rooms and let's meet back at 9 o'clock. Sound good?
9 o'clock.
Central. Other one, yeah. All right, but let's go back to the question asked start class, and that was how do you add a bunch of entries to a table? And we were saying like there were multiple ways to do that, right? Like you could do that the same way that you've been doing running an insert script using uh, a SQL file, right? If we look at our table here, oh, one other cool thing about the admin console is you could just very easily select everything, delete all of the rows, and you'll be prompted if you're sure. There's a little bit of validation there. And now we see that we've emptied the table, right? So if we go back to VS Code, is this sharing? Right. If we look at our table now, inside of our container, we see that it's empty. And we can use things like the Docker CP command to copy an init.sql file into our container, which we could then run with the -f command. And again, you could also just do that with, oh, what is that called? That symbol, the redirect symbol. So, so the redirect symbol, instead of using a -f, it would be this. And the difference again is this redirect allows you to run the script from your local machine. So I just ran the script. If we go back to our database, it's been updated. Now we've got about 25 entries in here. Sorry for all the clutter in the window, but yeah, so that's one way. And what else? I think I also mentioned just essentially using like vanilla Python, right? So if we were to create a script like this, where we say, this is some student data, it's missing a bracket, and we simply loop through this data to create records, then we could also add it that way. And so let me hop into shell, the Python shell, because this shell is essentially just a Python terminal, right? So you could do the same things you could do in a regular Python terminal, like importing methods from a specific file. So from Python insert, import the name of your method. So in this case, students underscore table. And if I run this, and we look at our counts again, we can see that it has increased. And I think that's because it increased to 50 because I actually hadn't saved this. And if I do a Command Z several times, then we actually did have 25 entries in the original file. So that's another way. But I think maybe the easiest way or the fastest way is to use a built-in method called load data. So let's exit out of this shell. Let's get back into bash. And let's again run that python manage.py command, right? Because if you run this, you'll be able to see all of the methods that you can call or commands to execute, whatever you want to call them. And in this case, we have load data. And we could use load data to load student JSON data. So it's just another way of doing that. But one reason this is the fastest, or maybe one of the fastest, is because there's also a dump data command as well, right? So let me do load data on students.json. It says it's installed 25 objects, so it's confirmed that it worked. We do our select, and we see that we've increased the table size by another 25 entries. And dump data works essentially the same way. You pass in dump data, and then you reference the table or the app, actually, I think. And then you have to use the redirect to get that into a file. So let's say students table backup.json. I do an ls, that'll show this new table, or sorry, this new JSON file with all of the student data from the table. And yeah, that's another way to get data into your tables using commands like dump data, load data. So Sean, does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely gives us some tools to do it. And then if you want to automate it, then you would just have to make a .sh file that would run the terminal commands instead of just hand jamming it yourself. So you can run one file.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you've got plenty of options. Okay, you all are going to continue with Django tomorrow. I think you're going to be doing more testing, and you're going to be working with validators, which a few of you have already started looking into, but that's what you've got to look forward to. Good work today, and I will catch you all next week.